Hey guys, you're listening to Starter Set, Season 2, Episode 11. We're going to be talking about Dragon Ball Super today. Giving our final thoughts on it, I'm joined by both Ian and Gibby for this episode. Be sure to swing by our Discord and let us know if you've been playing this game or what games you've been playing recently. What card games have you been enjoying? There's a link for that in the description of this episode. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand things over to our hosts for this week's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Starter Set. My name is Mark, one of your hosts, and I am joined tonight by none other than my amazing co-hosts, Ian and Gibbles and Bits. Gibby, welcome back, everybody. It's so good to be back in the studio with you guys today.
Episode 2 of the team returning. I still doesn't feel real. Still feels like I've been away for way too long.
Yeah, well, and don't get used to it.
On this
because we're breaking up the band again.
That's right.
That's so much philosophy. Spoiler alert. We're just giving an update flash for the end, on the card Gibby and I are going to be taking charge on the next game we're going to announce at the end of this episode. And DBN is going to take a much needed, a much earned break from making content with us, and probably going to be spending some time more focused on our YouTube presence, which is kind of worked out spotlights on me, baby. One of us had a great week for a little while, but they can make a few videos.
I mentioned earlier in the podcast that one of my
kind of like a pretty good
goals.
It's like a good
I still will be seeking that goal.
I got so
technically
sick during April.
One of my goals
I just feel so behind
was to win a major card
everything.
Game. Damn, did I come
the
close?
YouTube channel where
I went and played in my
majority of the. Not necessarily all the editing, but a lot of the
Memphis,
producing, getting it uploaded, getting the descriptions written, putting the
30
thumbnails together.
This
so like I'm behind on that.
Came in second.
I'm behind at work. I'm behind
in
the preparing for these tournaments that I'm going to. So like I'm just behind.
We're not necessarily on the payroll for Legends Camp, but it does feel like we've all earned some hard PTO.
Share the finals with some hard time. We've earned hard time
in the slammer.
Hard time shackled to the microphone, baby.
And we're actually just in jail when you don't hear from us. Another World Con tournament this upcoming weekend. Hopefully. But I'm gonna need you to formally. It was just exciting to kind of get the validation of the hard work.
All right, who do I submit that to Jeff?
No, you submit the Jeff or Payne or somebody.
Jeff is officially Camp Legend HR
as a pilot. So that was really.
So I do have a question for you guys.
I do want to give a couple shout outs real quick if I can.
So you don't even know what it was. First off, but I was to the people who are watching on YouTube the Dragon Ball Z game, and listeners on the podcast, it's a game that's like super character oriented, right? Like Gibby brought home. You can easily find your character and feel like you are building your entire deck around your character, or even that variant of your character, right? Like I've noticed there's like Goku, but then there's like Goku Universe 3 or Setting World 3 or something like that, right? You can build all around kind of something that you love.
This is what I get for
if you had to pick another intellectual property that used a pretty similar
enchanted promo.
Where you sort of
hard to see in this camera because it's in this case, but I get an enchanted
much all of your
promo Stitch Rockstar.
I was thinking about this because Flesh and Blood is kind of similar to that, right? You kind of have a hero, and a lot of the cards that you're playing, I think, is equipping and powering up
beautiful
character in Flesh and Blood. Except I've never been interested in Flesh and Blood because it's
really excited about
that I know anything about, its own thing. Okay, now is there an IP out there?
I was like, okay, so I can go
a card game that really isn't focused on the cards that go out on the board as much as it is
we have
powering up that
quite a few people
that I'm building my whole
doing
deck
some
around.
great work.
So
first of all,
for you
one of our
you'd really like to see
best friends
latch on to this sort of idea.
Discord, Payne placed second at his local.
I think it's a little bit of a cop-out.
So he got his own
said this for another question similar to this, but I think this is maybe the perfect from a design perspective, which is Destiny. I think Destiny
he did fantastic.
Is perfect for that.
He deserves
so much of what you do in the game is charging up.
I also wanted to
abilities, charging the Legends cast, the managing cooldowns on your grenades,
OG Legends
cast, class abilities. That's how you
awesome.
know he's an OG. Exotic perks,
Yeah.
got the guns that you build.
I wanted to say good luck to our friends I Spy Frolic.
There's a lot that goes into that, and
and Alicia, who are
building
up
at the
Illuminary Library,
maybe assembling your exotic
competing in several events
themselves,
including in Atlanta,
and getting the pieces pieces of that together as you duke it out. And I'm curious in that, like,
I also wanted to say real quick. So for there's a good friend of mine,
whether you would
at our
be
locals
in sort of
Memphis,
like a PvE mode where you're
Impact TCG,
like,
you can find him
there's
on
a
YouTube.
component
Rod Gaston, he's a
I've got
fantastic
my little forces,
YouTuber.
and they've got their forces. If you really wanted to get deep into the lore of, like, okay, well,
go check his content out. We'll have his YouTube channel
which
posted.
is not a guardian, not a playable character, right? But if you were basing it around,
those
like,
are my shoutouts for
like,
now.
There's these strong characters.
How have your week?
You have Ikora and Cade, and
Ian, why don't you tell us?
Obviously all of the big bads, right? But you also have even slightly newer characters in the added to the mix, like just a quick shout out. I mean, steer clear of that one.
Nimbus is the worst. I don't know a whole lot of Destiny, but I know that
Curry. Yeah, they're a bit of a disaster.
I stopped myself from falling with a not so friendly adjective.
I know he had a winning record, but I believe he but I mean, I think if you think about it, like, there's so many NPCs I had a great time helping him prep for and we played that I think that could work, right? A bunch of games, obviously, and practice. Any of the main sort of came up with took a list, but now even some of the cooler ones like Crow, right, additions, which he is covering. What is the Queen videos, right? One, like all of those could work really that deck list. And I can almost see a situation where, like, for those that are like Guardians, right? You could see a version where most of the cards that you're building are all about building them up, but for some of the ones that are enemy faction leaders, they're about putting minions on the board instead. So definitely checking out those videos. I mean, think about it this way. Well, think about like an asynchronous build where you've got like the different copycatted, and so you've got like the Guardians are like insane amounts. It's just a one-man wreck.
He released a video,
and like you don't really, or if you do have allies, it's like a handful to build like a fire team of 3, not like a lot of dudes, right?
Was released today,
but imagine playing something like Savathun, the Hive goddess, right?
So
and being like, I'm just swarming instead of powering myself up as much as the Guardians and outfitting my guns with perks and stuff. I'm swarming the field with all these different. I think that could be a really cool way of
which
making
feels very
individual
from a lot of the Magic Hearthstone
character
board
feel like
trading
the center
games.
point of the game.
It really is a fantastic
Dragon Ball does
game,
that probably
especially
better
in its
than any other
current
game that I've
state.
card game that
So
I've played.
I think it's in a really
your characters
albeit ironic considering there's a slight bit of a top
we
dog
didn't care
deck
for
right
that
now.
in Runeterra.
But besides that top dog deck, there is still
I would say it's a little
half
bit
a dozen
because,
to a dozen viable archetypes.
We
in the
could
meta
get into that,
right
but
now.
I think it is.
Really
I think there is a
cool
difference
to
between
be in this
the way that
era
Runeterra
of
did it, where
Pokemon.
all of
So,
your decks
anyways,
had
just throwing that out
to
there.
go around the champions
how
that you
about
chose.
you? Is there anything else
versus
in
feeling like
your
you're
card
playing a
gaming this
character,
week?
which I think is we basically shouted out. I think I feel like there's a nuance to that. A little subtle.
Sure, I guess I can talk about
Gibby, how about you? Is there an intellectual property that you feel like would work well?
A couple things.
Kind of feeling like
one,
playing that
spent the weekend
powering up everything around
skipped out on some of the store
so
championships in the
I was
area
trying
this
to.
weekend because I had not visited my
I'm appreciative
parents
that Ian went first
way too
because
long.
It gave me time to think. He just had a snap answer that was a very good one.
Hung out with them.
I originally was going to go with
all of Saturday,
probably the intellectual property
that
Dad. I am.
So
has very predominant characters.
We played
and I
an absurd amount of Star Wars on
playing
the way.
with Nintendo.
We played a bunch of Pokemon. We played Azul.
I think I'm going to switch it up and give one different. There is
my wonderful girlfriend
an
Lindsay
IP
got
that
me.
Consistently every time they put out a game, despite me not being great at like PvP fighters,
still in a box, but
those styles of games, I am
the size of the normal.
I don't think you know the answer I'm going with, Ian.
And I got my mom to jump in and try it.
Every time
and we all had just
they put out a new game,
sort of.
I'm always
playing that game. It's a really nice, sort of low stakes. I think
you would be close, really but it's not. And I thought I considered Tekken.
And then
it's Soul Calibur. It's Mortal Kombat
League on Sunday.
I think
other little shout
you're a
out,
Tekken man. I know this about
I
you,
like
best
both
friend.
Ready to run it
You're
back.
a Tekken man.
Yes, I am. I am a Tekken. I'm a Tekken fan before a Mortal Kombat fan. But when I think about the physical characters themselves having what I'm going to call supernatural powers. I mean, there are some Tekken characters that are like you're
hoping to
like the Mishima clan and like the Mishima line doesn't necessarily have like regular powers. They've got like devil genes.
I'm then turning around the next day
and
running our local.
It would be really cool to have Scorpion.
So I'm
gonna
have a very long
Lorcana
weekend.
Or Reptile or Shao Kahn.
There's like 5
what are more
or 6
predominant
set
individual
championships in my area.
like characters that have these.
You should get a promo.
Big fingers crossed that you can differentiate from one another, and they've got a really strong.
I have a good day.
Top to bottom.
I think that
I think not only with the roster
interesting
deep,
spot where there's a lot of great decks, but there's a lot of
unique to play each of the characters.
Polarized
and it would be hard to imagine that, especially with some of the iconic.
Kind of got to hit the right matchups.
Scorpions
right
get over here with
the that top 8,
with the chain and hook.
So like I'm really
Shao Kahn and his giant
nervous because it's going to be a huge 50-player tournament.
In making such individual,
there's a lot of sweaty
figureheads of a deck or commanders in the Mortal Kombat style. So while I do love Tekken, and Tekken is better than Mortal Kombat, in my opinion,
and we will be competing in Atlanta.
I think Mortal Kombat
that's like the bigger
thing
that
slightly more interesting IP.
We've got a month
to make in this deck style card game with like a predominant figurehead.
We're going down.
They also have a lot of history.
It's going to be, I think
that's
four of us going.
Splitting an
Airbnb. Even people that have not really played. I do know that. Yeah, I Spy will have to meet up.
And that was the point I didn't fully flesh out. Was every single time they put out a game, despite me not being good at PvP games,
but at least when you go to one of those
playing them much, I always go through and watch the storyline.
It's either 1,000 or 2,000 players
of Mortal Kombat because I love all their games because I love
to participate
in in-depth lore and the storytelling that they do put in the Mortal Kombat games. I think it's fantastic.
You still get a sick.
I will say I didn't. I don't love Mortal Kombat, but I did love the similar approach that they took with
maybe not staple cards, but some like playable cards.
DC,
so that's pretty darn cool.
That is DC Dual Force?
No, the fighting game.
Injustice was awesome.
Injustice, yes. I loved Injustice. Both Injustice and Injustice 2 were fantastic.
My gaming
only
focused in on Star Wars.
What is it? Not 2D, but the only fighting game, side-scroll fighting games I've ever picked up and actually played significant amount.
Aquaman was my main Injustice.
And he has been playing Star Wars Unlimited with me.
I was a Green Arrow guy. I was a Green Arrow guy. All the trick arrows. I learned the inputs to do all the trick arrows. So like
Aquaman 2, I had the most success smashing buttons on.
But he went and played. I think the really cool thing was
fair enough.
Third, but he ended up beating the first place
for
person.
Me,
I think that tournament bracket organizing.
I think that Destiny's a really good call, and it made me think of another one.
And this is kind of an old school, and I think it is kind of an anime.
And so we didn't really know why.
I didn't watch a lot of it because we didn't have neither here nor there. The really cool part about that,
find
it his own homebrew
always
deck
a really intriguing world.
I actually always wanted to teach. Kind of known to be one of the worst champions.
I made one
at one
point, or at least
most of the worst leaders in the game. And
I think it could be cool to have a Gundam Wing card game where you powered up your
really strong meta
with all sorts of weapons and stuff.
I think Gundam Wing could really really cool
genre.
And it was one of the ones that I would choose, which would be a cop out would be Marvel, and it's a cop out because it already exists.
Marvel Champions actually does this
for Star Wars
really well, where you really do feel like you're going to be away your character, but you still feel like you get to customize your deck and play something unique in that PvE card game.
The other thing is they've been
fantastic. It's a really fantastic
set, including a couple of leaders.
So shout out to Fantasy Flight.
There's a couple of different mechanics.
I'm still putting stuff out for it. It's not canceled
yet. But I
yet.
thought the cool one
it's an excellent mechanic. One of the card games that I own. It's a living card game. Everything for it.
But I think the Gundam Wing could be cool.
And I always found
later if it has a
flying in space, a little bit anime to be like
out of your resource.
Really, I don't know. I always found it
lay it down as a resource and later smuggle it out of your resource.
And so I think I could be trying to
take the top card.
It's interesting. This is now fully.
I thought that was really cool. I don't know. Has Lord Khan added anything like that? The ability to
never wasn't much of a Gundam fan. I do love Nex. Huge fan of Pacific Rim.
Are you allowed to look at your resources?
Great movie, so good. It is
that's something you can't.
It's going to be a cult classic for a long time. Such a good Idris Elba. Able to look at Canceling the Apocalypse, fantastic movie. One of the things I loved about that though was the whole like. I don't know how big mechs required two people to like be drift compatible, right? They had to like mind meld to pilot these things. And I've long been working through, and I have not figured out the mechanics yet, but I've always thought it'd be make for an awesome rules light RPG to do like a cooperative, like focused on being two players and one DM of two players co-piloting a mech fighting kaiju. It incentivizes, and I've been working on it for a while. I have almost finished written a like a little one-page RPG, which is a comedy one
amount of those
based on
the reservist
thing was. But I've been trying to work on this one for a while, and you just made me think about it.
You had that benefit
about Gundams, and I can bring it in from my resource row and replace it with the top card of my deck.
I would play it. I'll tell you that.
Smuggle,
I always thought it would be cool to have that type of TTRPG.
For that being said, let's get on to subject the resource row
because we are finishing our conversation.
I think it is a beautifully designed
around Dragon Ball
as the, like, you pay
and
a
I
little
think
bit
I was
of tax
calling it Dragon Ball Z Super, and I think that I
actually
got
it
wrong
last
week.
But you can use
I'm not
it
actually
that
sure
way.
that
I
that's
think
the
it's
name.
super cool.
And I mean,
it's called.
It is. It's called
Smugglers.
Dragon Ball
and
Super.
It's not called Dragon Ball Z Super.
I looked up Dragon Ball Z Super, which is a thing. It's just entirely around the Outer Rim, which has me super. So it's actually Dragon Ball Super, and then it's Fusion World. It's Dragon Ball
Sun games. So we got a group of people
because there's been so many
variants Sun games over webcam
this week,
and I'm super pumped about that.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna open it up by just talking about if we got a chance to sit down and play some Dragon Ball Super this week, and if we did, what was the starter deck?
Our last
couple weeks in card games, guys.
Gibby
this time,
bringing home
why don't you
dub
show
or
us
that close
what
to
was
a
your
dub,
week like
close
in
enough to
Dragon
a dub
Ball,
per
and,
game that and a promo
as
card.
You played it, what was the
hopefully
starter
Ian,
deck that you and girlfriend?
Yeah, so my week in Dragon Ball Super Fusion World was really fun. It was like this off-speed kind of game that I could turn to when I wasn't trying to jam games and test for my deck for Lorcana that I was taking to all of these tournaments, one last weekend, going to be one this weekend. So Dragon Ball Super, despite being like a pretty mentally involved game, it was nice just to not have to think about like what cards do I need to take into my deck or matchup do I need to worry about for Lorcana.
Not this time,
especially since I'm taking Dragon Ball Super in the lens of a starter
and this post-show
player as like a beginning player. So I did all of my playing unapologetically in the practice arena against the AI, which one of the better and kind of cooler things about Dragon Ball Super is that, especially if that's what you're aiming to do and you're trying to get acclimated with the game, whatever deck you're taking into the practice arena, you can choose what color you want to play against, and they basically give you a starter deck to play against with one of the different leaders, and you can kind of get a feel for the different pacings and against what color maybe your deck does well or maybe your deck doesn't do well. What champions powers are a problem, or are you having good matchups against this style of deck? So we all chose a different starter deck to go through, and the intro tutorial gives you the red one to go with Goku. That's what you start learning how to play. So since there's 3 of us and there's 3 other starter decks, we all chose a different one outside of the red Goku deck. I chose the green Broly deck. Now green is it's kind of combo oriented is what it feels like, a little bit of recursion back from your graveyard. And I imagine there's probably graveyard recursion mechanics in all of the colors. I don't know that for sure, but what I can tell you is green feels like the ramp color. And specifically, that's what they have you focus on in the starter deck with Broly, is trying to, you have these extra cards, which are essentially actions or spells. We've mentioned that in the past. They're not character cards you're playing on board. They give you extra cards where you are pulling an extra card into from the top of your deck into your mana to be able to pull from. It's like, oh yeah, play this and pull an extra card in and draw a card. So you're cycling through your deck, you're ramping up in your mana pool to be able to pull from. There are cards that allow you to, if you have X amount of mana already in the game, then you get this effect, you get this boost on this character when you're trying to add totals from your hand or add totals from your playable field to try to defend or push through attacks. So it allows you also to like pull extra cards back from your discard pile into your hand, and if you've got X number of mana, then I think you can even gain a life back. I don't think it's a card that they gave you in the starter deck, but I did see that as an extra card. It was like one of the suggested cards. If you want to, if you want to build this deck, if you want to boost it up, go ahead and add this card. And it's like regaining like health totals, because you're kind of okay losing health with the Broly deck early, maybe triggering your change, your awakening ability. Yeah, if you're gonna trigger your awaken ability with Broly, and then you start making this epic comeback, kind of like classic ramp decks do. So I liked the deck. I'm not a combo player. I'm not a ramp player, so it wasn't a play style that I would probably gravitate toward, which is cool, especially when you're exploring a new game. So I didn't have this like, oh, it clicked immediately. I really had to work through some of the progressions and the combos and the ordering of the cards, even at a basic level in a starter deck. So it was fun. I found that combo struggles as this combo ramps really struggled against red, this aggro style, but it handled the control deck really well. It can handle yellow with some of the denial because you're so board present and you're ramping and like you're ramping and they're wanting to interact with your board and you're just like, I'm focused on me right now, buddy. It's like, I just got out of a breakup. I'm trying to get my life straight. I'm focused on me right now. So it was a fun deck to play. And supposedly from a couple of the Reddit threads that I looked at, green is a very strong color. So I can see it too. I don't think Broly's the answer. I don't think Broly is the part that makes green strong.
Well, ramp in card games with limited card pools tend to be extremely good.
Yeah, especially early on.
Just less answers.
When things aren't super fast. Less answers.
Right.
People aren't
less
using
efficient
the most optimal cards. Yeah. People don't have like the ability to take advantage of you moving a little bit slower than them or you playing off tempo. As card pools expand and power creep happens, that makes a lot of sense, right? In Star Wars Unlimited Set 1, ramp is the most powerful centered thing to do in that game right now as well, because people are playing crap cards at certain points in the game because there's just not better options yet.
Especially with a game that has a built-in comeback mechanic too.
Yeah.
And this one definitely, I can't figure that one out, but that's a conversation for whenever I'm talking. So DBN, how about you? What deck did you pick and how was your week in Dragon Ball Super?
Well, similar to Gibby, I mostly played in practice mode. Unlike Gibby, I did not find myself booting this up as a off-pace relaxation game because I did not find it relaxing. I found it a little bit stressful and mildly overwhelming. That being said, I did play it out of obligation to the podcast. I'll just be blunt. I played it. I did my video game homework. And put some hours in. Now, I'll say this, which is different from when I have in the past. When I have felt that way about a game, I typically don't have a lot of good things to say about it, and that's not necessarily the case here. I played yellow with the Frieza starter deck. I also opened a butt ton of packs just from all of the different things they give you at the beginning, right? And pulled some good Frieza cards, which was pretty cool. When I built a deck, or rather I upgraded my starter deck. Now, I did not dabble in multicolor decks because that seemed like a lot to try to wrap my head around. But I did upgrade my starter deck with some of the powerful other yellow cards that I built. And I did, as I was deck building, notice that there's a lot of cool tribal tags involved in yellow around, Frieza's army, the Ginyu Force, which seemed really fun. And I always thought the Ginyu Force were ridiculous and stupid and funny in the show. And I most of my Dragon Ball Z lore, by the way, shout out, respond in the comments or jump in the Discord to tell me if you played Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2 on PlayStation 2. One of the best non side-scrolling fighting games ever released. Absolutely incredible. Really fun. I played the crap out of that fighting game. And I felt like it was a pretty fun game for the PlayStation 2. So shout out if you played Tenkaichi 2. They had a pretty lengthy campaign where you played through a lot of the classic stories. So that's where I know most of the lore from, is actually just the video game. But yeah, Ginyu Force, Cooler Squadron, stuff like that. Unfortunately, I did not collect enough cards and didn't have a way to craft those cards so have not yet been able to create decks based around the Ginyu Force or Cooler Squadron. I have no idea if they're any good or not, those decks, but they sure look like fun. Instead, I just went all in on the Frieza mechanics, which are all about interacting with exerted or exhausted or tired or recovering or whatever the heck the name for being tapped is. Resting, I think, is
resting.
I think it's rest.
Exhausted. It's not exhausted though.
I think it's rest. Anyways, interacting with rested units on the opponent's side, intentionally coming in and forcing those units into the rest mode, and then readying your characters out of rest mode. Some pretty cool stuff. And honestly, I had significantly more fun with that than any of the like tutorial stuff that I did in the previous weeks. And after upgrading the deck, I had a lot more fun than I had in my initial engagements with, just the Frieza starter deck. The Frieza starter deck had a lot of blank characters that just were stat blocks. I dumped all of those and put in things that did stuff. And surprise, surprise, it was a lot more fun. Some of my favorite interactions revolved around there's a character Banon or Banon, I didn't remember him, but he's got a neat effect where at the end of your turn you can ready one of your Frieza army characters, which is great because there's a giant, don't ask me which version of Frieza it is because I couldn't tell you, but there's a big old, I think 5-drop Frieza, which is redonkulously overstated, but it doesn't ready at the start of the turn. And so you have to find other ways to ready them, including Banon or whatever. So that was a fun thing where I felt cool, and like those cards were not in the starter deck. I pulled those. So it was neat that while I'm sure that deck or a version of that deck exists somewhere in the lexicon of talented players, I felt like I was able to look at my very limited collection and put together something from it that was a unique interaction that maybe not everybody could do when they have a limited pool of cards. So that felt really neat. I also thought that some of the cards, King Cold was pretty neat. He's a blocker, and he also when he gets knocked out, he can KO something that has that's exerted of a cost 4 or less or something. So there's some really cool tempo swings you can do. And I realized that the deck felt very akin to sort of a mid-range play style. I'm sure there's a version that's much more control-y, but the way I was building is I am taking value trades with the things that are on my opponent's board and pulling out some beat sticks that can smack the face, while similarly having that my leader, once they get powered up, I believe can execute some exerted things. I've got a cheap Frieza which comes in and taps stuff down, which then I can maybe King Cold, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, he might have been the one that when he swings, you can stop one of your opponent's guys from readying. That might have been it. I mixed them up. Anyways, some really cool stuff. Oh, no, that was a Frieza. I was right the first time. One of the 5-drop Friezas does that. Anyways, it gets confusing because there's like 4 different Friezas you play in this silly deck. Okay,
yeah, that is very confusing.
It's very confusing.
That's an all.
I'm not gonna lie.
Like multiple versions of the same character. I'm like, I don't know the difference.
Yeah, and they all look
and I'm struggling to find something that helps me remember what the different ones do. So that was fun, and I did beat a lot of the computer. I beat the computer quite a bit when I played on, not on the hard mode, but like on the easy and medium mode. I was finding some success. I did find that on easy mode, if you have a blocker out, the computer does some weird stuff where it starts sending units into your blocker without having enough power to overcome it, and it's like it's misunderstanding what blocker does. Not sure what's up with that. But I found it to be a lot more enjoyable than my first week playing. Now, we'll get into this in more depth. I don't know if it's something I really feel that compelled to try to master. Not that there isn't depth to the game, but the kind of depth that there is, I found my best strategy for winning tended to be pushing the tempo early in the game, whittling my opponent down to like a small, down to like 5. So right before they awaken, build my board up, and then flip my opponent over, and then try to either win on that turn or win in the next couple turns. And the only reliable way I could find to do that was through like double strike units. And those double strike units of which I had a couple in one of the freezes is really strong and it has double strike. And the way that I found that was helpful was I would build a hand advantage. And then when I flipped my opponent, I would then swing with a double strike unit and dump my hand. And my opponent would be forced to dump their hand too. And so now, even though my opponent's hero is leveled, and if I'm ahead in the game, mine's not, I realize like the ability for them to snowball their board advantage and snowball their advantage from having this new power access and to having it was limited because they didn't have as many cards that they could build around with. And so then as they get an advantage and begin flipping, they don't have a full hand to do that with. So that was what seemed to overcome some of the things that Mark and Gibby, you guys have expressed some frustration with, of like the comeback mechanic being just that insane.
You definitely can't ignore it.
You can't ignore it. So like, I think that there's been better implementations of a comeback mechanic like this. I thought TESL had a beautifully balanced comeback mechanic with the rune system. And I don't love it here, but I did find a way to sort of work around it, at least with my specific deck. And I'm sure there's some great, and what it did was convince me that there is likely some like all-purpose strategy that all of the players who play this competitively understand universally. And I don't know if my strategy is it, but it made me convinced that, like, just like in TESL, where it was like, hey, don't break a rune if you don't have to, if you can whittle them down to 26, don't, especially if you're controlling them or you don't know the way the tempo of the game is going, maybe don't break that first rune. Or whether it was the logic of like, okay, I'm ordering the way that I break the runes in order to reduce the chance of a prophecy hitting, right? This is for the TESL heads out there. But the point is that like the community ended up building knowledge that like you would be in the game for a week or two, and then you would see somewhere, hey, here's how to manage the rune system. And everyone goes, I get it now. And now I'm starting to think there's probably something like that out there for the more serious Dragon Ball Z competitors.
Yeah, like an easier way to understand it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it never became intuitive to me. Let's put it that way. I played Vegeta, and so that was the blue deck, which I think theoretically was kind of supposed to be
control,
a bit of a control deck. But I'll be honest, I think that maybe blue has the mechanics for that, but at least the variant of it that I had in the starter deck really didn't feel like anything. Like at no point did it feel like it actually did anything. It just felt like here are units that are in the deck, and here are 2 extra cards, which I think is what they're called, extras, that can remove things from the board or power up your guy. And that was really it.
That's so how my starter felt too before upgrading it, for what it's worth.
It just felt like it felt so vanilla. Now I will say this. I hardly played. I didn't play many games, but in those games, they gave a ton of resources to you when you joined for being in, the opening of the game. They gave a ton of resources to you for completing missions very passively. I had no idea that I was doing it. And they give you a ton of resources when you buy a starter deck. They actually give you more cards for that starter deck that don't start in it. I actually had enough playing a handful of games over the past 2 weeks to get 1 starter deck for free and to buy all 3 of the others. And so I have all 4 starter decks now, which I actually think is kind of, that's nice, right? It kind of gave you enough to start with 1. I only probably played a dozen or so games, and I feel like that's not a high cost. Like I lost a dozen games, right? And I still had enough resources to unlock all of the starter decks. So I kind of feel like that's pretty good. Like I kind of feel like that's pretty generous. I'm pretty hype on that. I think that's pretty cool.
I would say that my experience in the game this week, though, was not hype. I never really got in. I never really had time to sit down, or really, I wasn't gripped. I think it was because I wasn't gripped. Like in other games with different intellectual properties, I've been gripped enough by them that I've been like, I kind of want to go in and see what all the cards are and just see what they do. But in this game, having so many cards with the same name, and even a lot without the same name that just look the same, I was utterly overwhelmed as somebody who does not know anything about the property. To the point where I was like, man, I don't know that I can go into this like collection manager and start reading through and remember almost anything that I'm looking at. So I would say this. I feel like in this particular game, I was at a, which isn't necessarily the case in every game. I think that Lorcana specifically does a really good job of this, where you don't necessarily need to be terribly familiar with Disney movies to be able to pick up on what the characters are and to be able to differentiate them very easily. Whereas I feel like in this game, man, you benefited a lot from having watched a lot of Dragon Ball. Like, I feel like if you had watched a lot of Dragon Ball, were familiar with the villains and the heroes, were familiar with the universe, more than me, having watched, a handful of episodes of Dragon Ball Z throughout my life, not really knowing anything except Goku screaming for episodes at a time. I felt like I was very much so at a disadvantage, not for playing the game necessarily, but for being able to comprehend like the various cards and some of the stuff in it. I have confirmed, I genuinely believe I am not good at this game. I tried to figure out what you talked about there, DBN, of like, I know that this figuring out when to flip is important, and the Vegeta deck has self-damage in it. So it has a lot of cards that you play early that when you attack, you can deal 1 damage to yourself or draw a card from your health pool, which should give you health and then allow you to dictate a little bit more when you flip your card and become more powerful. And you can kind of catch your opponent off guard with that. And then I thought, theoretically, okay, then because that kind of felt like it wanted to race, because you wanted to attack. You needed to attack to deal self-damage to push yourself. So you're trying to get both of you kind of down to that 4 mark, and then they would flip, I would flip, and pretty soon I was losing card advantage. And I just didn't realize, I mean, in this game, card advantage is life. I mean, it is everything in this game. If you don't have card advantage, you're very likely not going to win. And I learned that the hard way like a dozen times. I don't know, probably 8 times today, easily. So I have yet to win a game of Dragon Ball Super. And I can't say that I left like ultra frustrated with it, because I know I didn't give it, because I wasn't as interested in the IP, I know I didn't give it as fair of a shake as maybe I would have had this been a DC game or a Harry Potter game or a Marvel game or a Star Wars game, right? Or an Avatar: The Last Airbender game, right? Had it been an intellectual property that I was more invested in, I think I would have been more inclined to dig deeper. But I do think that this game doesn't work super well with my brain. I think the way that I think about card games, I'd have to work really hard to shift that to be good at this. A lot of other card games I can just pick up and I can intuitively jump in and beat the computer, adjust my deck. It's no problem. This game is probably the hardest game that I have played in terms of like initial, just like grab it, pick it up, and it makes sense to me. It's probably the most difficult one that we've reviewed for me, honestly, which it's kind of humbling, because I played a lot of card games at this point and come to this one and be like, man, if I'm not stumped. So yeah, that was kind of like my week in it. Do we have anything additional things that we sort of picked up from the game over the course of this last week that maybe we didn't share on our initial episode, either positive or negative? I can pass things back to you.
I'm just going to echo the difficulty with understanding some of the differences in the cards. Like, I kid you not, while you were talking, and because you had said that you had opened up a bunch of packs, and I was like, like I had the game open in the background. Like, I find that helpful while we're talking and podcasting, to be able to kind of reference directly some of the content we're talking about in the client. And I was like, I never opened up any packs. why don't I open a couple while he's talking? I opened up a pack, I kid you not, with 3 different versions of Goku Black in the same pack that have no other delimiter, like no other name, sub name in the card to let you know which version of Goku Black it is. It's just Goku Black. It's got a different stat pool. It's got a different power level, cost, color, different abilities, but it just says Goku Black. And I don't know if there's one per rarity, and maybe that's the part that I'm missing. But like, if I was to converse with Ian about a different deck in Lorcana, and I said, "Oh, yes, I'm thinking about adding Tinkerbell or Big Tinkerbell into the deck, or Tinkerbell Tiny Tactician to the deck," he knows exactly what I'm talking about. He knows exactly what card I'm referencing. Oh, Rapunzel gifted with healing. True. Because there's different names. There's something very clear and specified about which Minnie Mouse I'm talking about in the game. Versus if I was just like, yeah, I upgraded my starter deck and I added Goku Black. Which one? Like, the context completely changes.
Yeah, and you're forced to say, yeah, it's the 6-drop one that's
and does this thing
1,000 or 70,000 or whatever the stupid numbers are. Yeah, it's like maybe that's the thing. Maybe Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, like I want to hear how they talk about it.
Goku, or like, oh yeah, 40K Goku,
super
Black.
rare Goku,
like,
versus common.
Maybe
Goku.
That's how they talk about it. That'd be a cool.
Maybe like I said, maybe there's one per rarity of a name, and that's how they talk about it.
I'm sure there's a rarity component. Listen, I'll be somewhat critical of, like, I don't love the way the cards are laid out, or I just don't like the look of the card. Well, okay, I take that back. The artwork is cool. It's very anime, and I'm not opposed to the artwork dominating the card. The problem is that, like, again, to Gibby's point, I would have loved to have seen some flavor text, or loved to have seen like a version name or something that makes it, sometimes games like Lorcana can really add to the card just by putting a version name. You know what I mean? And I think, Star Wars Unlimited, I'm a big Star Wars Rebels fan, right? And when I look at Chopper, right, and I see that his version name is Metal Menace, and that just makes me fall in love with it even more. I think there's something that's being missed on that sort of, and I mentioned this last episode, I'm struggling to connect to it, right? In any sort of meaningful way to the cards themselves. And that's big for me. I love feeling like I have these fan favorite cards, even if they're not good cards. Because listen, there's cards that I love because they're strong. And then there's cards that I love because they're cool or fun or funny or cute, And I'm missing that here.
I would agree with that.
I guess. Yes. I guess the exception to that rule is some of the Ginyu Force cards are funny because literally one of them is I can't remember which Ginyu guy it is, but he's literally like looking between his legs.
I think it's straight Ginyu. I think
that's the exception, because the Ginyu Force is it Ginyu? Yeah, but it's not the leader Ginyu.
I have to know now,
because there's a leader Ginyu. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't matter. Well, I don't know the names of these jabronis. I just always thought they were stupid and funny.
I continued to be turned off in this game because of the way they just seemingly didn't do anything with like formatting of text and stuff.
Yeah.
Like even in like their news, it looks like somebody copy, cut, and pasted it from a command log in a PC and then just shipped it.
It is Ginyu.
It's not the outside of
polish.
Outside of the gameplay, it's not polished.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The gameplay itself is, but everything else about the client feels like, man, either you had someone who didn't know what they were doing, or you just sort of threw this thing together.
I think it's a thrown together, underfunded project. I mean, look, at the end of the day, and here's what I'll say in defense of this: this is a physical card game, and having a digital client is a service to their physical players, in the same way that it is a service to Pokemon players that have TCG Live. TCG Live is not it's not the we want to make a bunch of money on online. Of course, it actually doesn't really do that, because it doesn't have like a traditional storefront where you can buy packs and stuff, right? TCG Live is a service to players, and it also, makes a little bit of cash here and there just off of,
Not really. There's no way to spend any real money in TCG Live.
I guess you buy codes, cards.
Yeah, it's encouraging you to buy more cards because then you can get code packs for it, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's making you feel like you're getting more value out of the card packs that you're purchasing.
Right. And I guess that's what I'm saying here, is that as much as and listen, I complain about TCG Live too. I think there's some things that it does not do well at all. And that, feels like should be, heck, if Pokemon, the world's biggest IP, why can't they put this together in a nicer package? But my point is that, like, at the end of the day, the primary audience for the online client of the game is people that are playing the game physically and need a way to practice. And it does that.
Yeah, that is true. It does do that, except my only exception to that, DBN, is I think that I could be wrong, but I think that the game itself is much further along than this. Like the game, like the physical card game has been out for several years and has had multiple expansions. Am I right in thinking that this is just like the first set?
I think it's early in the online client's development. I think you are correct about that. But I don't have any context for where the physical card game is.
I would not be surprised. Listen, if that's true, that's a bummer for the, physical card game players. And if it's true, I would also suspect that that's not a sustainable model, and that they are likely working to get all of the sets and get caught up. That's a pretty standard practice.
Track.
Yeah. So, I would not be surprised if this feels like it's like hey, we're testing these systems, get your hands on it while we're trying to get caught up.
Yeah, and if anybody knows this game and you're listening and you want to correct us on that,
please
let me know, because I watched a how to play video that had these things that were basically like planeswalkers from Magic the Gathering, where they were like a second character that you summoned to your board that had its own health pool, and every round you could use them and they would either gain health or lose health and trigger an ability on the board, right? So you could have Goku, but then you could have Vegeta summoned, who would also, once per turn, you could give him, +1 and he boosts something by 5,000, or -3 health and he would, boost something by 20,000. That's a horrible example, but let me just give that as the example. And in that scenario, you could target this Vegeta or you could target Goku. And that video was from 2002. And I didn't see anything like that in this game.
I think there used to be a different Dragon Ball Z game.
Well, you know what? That could be too. I could have been on an old card. Could have been watching stuff on an old card game, possibly.
Fairly certain there used to be an old DBZ.
Would explain the complicated name.
That is not the same as this current one.
That continues to add to my confusion. That continues to add to my confusion of the same names over and over again. And I really feel like you kind of needed to be a lore buff of Dragon Ball Z to really understand the different cards and the different characters and stuff. And I felt kind of just and on that.
So yes, and that's exactly why I think the missed opportunity is not including flavor text, not having artwork, frankly, that shows them not in a fight. I mean, there's something. So for context, again, Pokemon has done a fantastic job of their artwork for forever. But recently, I have been over the moon with their illustration rares, because something that they've done is humanize these Pokemon. So it's not just like, here's a critter out in the wild. They're putting these Pokemon in slice of life scenarios integrated with human society. They've got an Excadrill in this last set, a mole, basically a drilling mole Pokemon, right? And what is it doing in this illustration rare? It's sitting there in a mine next to a bunch of humans eating a sandwich with them while they're on their lunch break. How freaking adorable is that? It endears you to the Pokemon that you otherwise may not have had a background for, right? And that's something that I think this game's artwork thus far, or of what I've seen, has not been particularly interesting. Because while, yes, we do know these characters predominantly from them powering up and punching things with Psybolts and crap, right? The show was not just that. Yes, it was mostly that. The show was not just that. I happen to know from the limited, engagement I've had of it, right? Watching Dragon Ball on my, grandmother's TV that was deeper than it was wide, right? But that like Goku would go on these adventures and have funny interactions with people and joke around and fly around on the cloud and, go and play pranks on Master Roshi, right? Like, I think you would find, Mark, and I suspect I would too, that we would become more endeared to these characters if the artwork was showing them in a range of, activities and scenarios. So yes, maybe the ultimate Omega cool Frieza that is like super duper powerful is this certain look, but maybe, one drop Vegeta is him asleep getting pranked by Goku, or maybe because he's all super serious, or maybe, I don't know any of the characters, but maybe it's just showing them in more human scenarios and not just all of them feel like a stock anime photo, because that's what they all feel like, is like every card art feels like it should be the banner image when you're select your fighter. You know what I mean? All of them feel that way.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. Gibby, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, not a whole lot else that I wanted to add. I think the art is to be desired. I think some of the card structure, like Ian said, we've mentioned in our previous episode that I wasn't really a fan of the font. I think the font detracts. It almost feels like, you know what it feels like? It feels like an ID card that you give a scientist in a shitty 90s movie. Like that, like where you get to like scan it and like the text is all slanted and it says like Zone 3 on it. Like that's what it feels like the art, where like the text is, and it's not really endearing when you're trying to nail down details and like don't want to have to scan through all of your. No. I'm not trying to get to the biospace weapons lab. I'm trying to read a card so that way I can play it on the field in a timed event. So, I think the card design itself, it confirms our thoughts.
I would be curious if it passes visual accessibility tests, because I'm doubting.
I also just think like even like you know what's something that's so simple that I think they could do? Brighten up the colors on like the exterior of the card, because like where it's telling you what color or what faction it is between green or blue or yellow or red, it's kind of hard to tell sometimes outside of the small little dots that they just give you. Like
it is hard to tell.
The dot is really small.
Well, the dot is really small.
Yeah, they need to have used the space on the cards. I as much as I roast Star Wars for Star Wars Unlimited for the frames not looking very good and everything should be hyperspace, I would say the opposite here, which is they could really use a frame which is colored to indicate what the heck color each card is. They would really benefit from that. Yeah, I will say one little thing before we move on that I thought was cool. It's a very tiny thing, but a lot of games don't have it, so I appreciate that.
I didn't even know you could do that.
The ability to rearrange cards in your hand.
Yeah, that's so rare.
Fantastic.
I didn't even try that. I just assumed that you couldn't.
I did it on accident, and then was like, oh, this is lovely. I wish every card game should have the ability to do this, and they don't. There's a certain, kind of like Hearthstone, clicking on the things, right? There's a certain fidget factor in digital card games, and rearranging cards is something I literally do in my hand, like when I play. And so like the ability to kind of do that mindlessly as you wait for your opponent to take their turn or whatever. Plus the benefit of being able to structure your hand when you're trying to think through something, is really nice. So good job.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the thing that we have two last things that we'd like to chat about, and I think these will be a little bit quicker, but, and we'll start with you, DBN, but what is one thing that you think this game does that you would like to see other games learn from and maybe introduce to their games? Because I think that's been one of the coolest things about playing such a wide variety of games, is I've been able to identify some like mechanics that I'm like, oh, this was kind of cool. Maybe I don't like this game, maybe I don't love everything about it, but this would be a cool thing to see other games learn how to use.
Yeah, so great question. And I thought about it, and I think I have a nice answer, which is that I would like to see other games dabble in the powering up mechanic. Now, I know that seems silly because I know we've been mildly critical of that mechanic in that it feels like it trivializes the value of cards in your hand. And often, and I've said, I just don't like how hard it is to see what the power up numbers are and everything, but I think that's a client issue. I think it'd be better if I was playing cards in hand. But it reminded me of a sort of subtle mechanic in Versus System way back when that I always thought added a lot to the depth of the game, which was called power up in Versus System. But what it was is because there was a rule in Versus System where, similar to Star Wars Unlimited, you could not play a unique character of the same name as one already in play without discarding the previous one. You would occasionally play decks, especially as the game grew on, and there would be cards that would call out specific heroes, right, or villains. So you might have cards that say exert or exhaust a Spider-Man character you control, right? Well, if there was a situation where I'm ready to upgrade my 4-cost Spider-Man, which has survived this long, and I'm going to play my 7-cost better Spider-Man, and I'm okay with discarding the 4-cost, that's great. But sometimes you'll sit there with like, oh no, I drew 2 or 3 copies of that Spider-Man, and I'm never going to play a fresh one here. Right. He's going to be sitting on the board for a while. What do I do? Because I can't play a new one. So they have this thing where if you discard a card from your hand that shares a name with a character in combat, you give them +1/+1 for the fight.
Oh,
and so it was subtle. Most event cards called plot twists in here would have much bigger attack swings. I mean, the standard, like the bare minimum to be included in a deck tended to be +3 attack. Right. And there was a lot of cards that would, +3 attack and a keyword for the attack or whatever. And slightly less common would be defense boosts, right? So like there would be, +2 defense for the attack. Okay, great. But the ability to never completely know if your opponent had a couple extra Spider-Man stashed in their hand was always a facet of the game that really added that wrinkle of depth to combat, where you might say, all right, I'm pretty sure they have an unrevealed resource, which could be a plot twist. That's this deck, so I know they have access to a +4 defense boost. I'm swinging with a +6 defense or +6 attack. I should be fine. And then your opponent with a stack of 5 cards in hand says, sorry, buddy, I'm going to power up twice and then use a search card to go grab a 3rd Spider-Man and dump my hand, and I survive this attack, and it swings the tempo of the game, but it has this, your resources are coming in, and having an additional effect. I think that I don't like the way Dragon Ball Super does it. I did like the way Versus System does it, and I do think it's since then, a completely unexplored mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
So I would very much love to see, those character cards that often do nothing if they're sitting in your hand have that sort of additional value.
Yeah, I like that. How about you, Gibby? Something that you think this game could
I will say something I liked
or this game
about
other
this
games
game
take from this game rather.
The being able to and here's where I will put it. I liked that you could utilize the cards in your hand to help you defend in combat as almost like a burst. I found that to be very intriguing and like a whole nother resource utilization piece. Now, what I would say is I don't necessarily like the idea that you can dump your hand in an attack, because then I think that streamlines the end game a little too much, where it becomes clear to one opponent that if they've got card, again, puts too much emphasis on card advantage and not enough emphasis on board control. Like if you want to attack somebody, you need to have to me, it nullifies the importance of the board and like needing to go through the board in order to really push and punch through an attack and like have to win the game. But I do like you as like a last ditch effort, which is the whole point of being able to pull cards from your hand in these defense modes, in these defense mechanics. I like that. In order to stop yourself from losing the game and having a full hand of 10 cards, you can utilize some of your cards to give yourself a temporary reprieve from not just being blown out and like getting blitzed down. I like that piece of things, and I think other games could utilize it, but I would make the hand interaction more one-sided, where it is strictly focused on the defense aspect of things. Still gives your opponent the agency to determine, do they want to utilize some of their hand and go down on cards to not be in the hole on life. But they also can choose, no, I think I can make a comeback later on and utilize my cards if I can use them the way I'm anticipating and get on board and punch through more attacks. Like, these are going to be more useful to me later. They can just let things go through. I think that is the more interesting application of your hand buffing versus I'm just going to all out blitz stack on one card at the end of the game and just make an unstoppable force attack that you can't deal with. It's very Dragon Ball Z, so I think it's very appropriate for this game. Just the one big final, this is my last chance, Kamiha. Like, I get why they're doing it that way, but if we're talking about the application is going in other games, I think it comes down to more of a game mechanic of like defense is really important and really interesting too. Like, it's an underrated part of card games is how you play defense.
I think we all have kind of a similar thought, and maybe it's one of the only really unique things that this game has done. I'm going to call it multi-use, like multi-purpose, multi-use cards, where every card has multiple ways that you can resource it, you can power up, you can defend or attack with it, and you can play it. I love board games like that, and there's a ton of board games that explore that space. There's one; it's a real small box game called Oh My Goods, that is literally like every resource can kind of be every card can kind of be a worker. It can be discarded as a resource, or on the other side of it, it can be flipped and played as a building that generates things for you. And you're kind of trying to build a little engine, but it's just a little deck of cards. But because it has a lot of depth, because every card can do three or four things. And I think I would love to see card games look to things like that more often. Where right now, in most cards can be used for two things: resources, right? Or they can be played. And that's kind of it. And in some games, it's less than that. Like, let's be real, right? A lot of games, it's less than that. Cards can be played, and that's it. And I do appreciate that Dragon Ball looked at it and said, hey, what would a card game look like if we gave you way more card draw, but we also gave you way more ways that you can use the cards that you have? And it left like card advantage be an extremely important thing, maybe the most important thing, while also giving you oftentimes a hand of 9 or 10 cards that you were consistently refilling when you're only drawing one a turn. I think they did that really well, and they made it so that your cards felt like they had multiple ways that you could use them. And so if I did draw, that one drop later on that I didn't need because I needed him at 1, or I had 3 copies of two drops in my hand and I'm trying to play on curve, then I felt like, well, that's fine. I'll keep these 2 drops in my hand to play one of them in the future, either resource one, or I can use it to power up or defend myself later for one of the attacks. And I did find that I wasn't good at that, but I did find that was pretty cool. Our next question was, who is this for? And I'll be honest, I don't know that any of us would disagree. Maybe Gibby, you would. I wouldn't disagree with Ian, your take, saying that this game is probably for people who enjoy playing the game physically and are looking for a client to be able to practice and play and deck build on. Yeah.
I have very little more to add to this. Now, I will say that's specifically talking about the digital client, I think maybe we should ask the question of like, what about the game itself?
Oh,
like we did not pick the game up physically, but I think I said last episode, I do think this game would be A, more approachable, B, feel faster and feel more dynamic in person. I think part of the thing that bogs down the digital client is all of the checking you have to do. Yes, I want to confirm this. Yes, I want to do this. Yes, but I mean, imagine in a game where you're just simply like, I mean, imagine the feeling of going like, all right, I'm going to swing with Frieza. It's a double strike against Goku, and I'm going to go 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,500, 1,000, 1,500. Bam, I'm up to whatever that math is. You know what I mean? Like that's got to have a satisfying, albeit juvenile, sensation attached to it.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So who is the physical game for then? And I think that to a certain extent, the physical game, it's still for Dragon Ball Z fans, right?
Sure.
Like I think you still are going to struggle to get into this game just as a card game player, because I think that you kind of need to like Dragon Ball to really like this game. Maybe that's not 100% true. Maybe there's more depth there than I'm giving it credit for. But I think there is a lot of depth there, but I think it is the type of game where it's unique enough and there's enough other physical card games out there that you have got to be pretty attached to the intellectual property. And then I think you also not only have to be attached to intellectual property, I think you have to be pretty decent at card games. Like,
yeah,
I feel like this game is it's not super easy.
Can I throw out there, though, that I think that there's enough of a back and forth in these games because of the rubber band mechanic that you may lose a lot of your games, but you may not always feel like you got stomped or got smoked. Right? So, like, I think weirdly, this is the last thing I have to say on this topic because I agree. Dragon Ball Z fans or anime fans, probably, right? But I do think that this might actually be a game that benefits you as a player if it's your first card game, because you're not coming in with these preconceived concepts.
Bunch of bad habits that I might have.
Well, so a bunch of games that teach habits that actually seem to be almost willfully discarded by the mechanics of Dragon Ball. I mean, hand advantage is both equally important and not important in this game, like at the same time, based on the phase of the game you're in. I also think that like if you were to give two 12-year-olds each, if you're getting 12-year-olds each a starter deck, have them play each other, they probably would not play with the level of discipline that we do, where we're thinking through, okay, do I want to build this hand? Do I want to throw the thing down? They're probably emptying their hand almost every turn, powering each other up and trying to one-up each other. I got to imagine this game is at its base appealing to a younger audience, and also at the same time appealing to people that don't have a bunch of preconceived notions about what makes a card game, what makes, combat or, hand size or whatever, and coming into it with fresh eyes. So I'll just throw that out there too.
Yeah. I you know what? I think I agree with that. I think it's possible that some of my preconceived thoughts and ideas around card games may just be hurting me in this game. Like maybe some of my card game experience isn't such an advantage in this game because it does play differently than a lot of other card games that I've played.
I think that's definite. I think that if you come in and you try to use your general card game theory, this game, I think, both interestingly but also frustratingly rejects a lot of those core principles in an effort to be truly, truly different, which I don't think is bad. I think it's ambitious. I don't think it's I think that's why it feels very unintuitive, probably for all three of us. So,
yeah. Interesting. Well, okay, all of that to be said, final verdict. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Gibby, we'll start with you. Is this a game that you think you will be
I think this is an easy, that's it for me. I checked it out. I enjoyed our run through on it. I think I got a little taste of the Tessel spice in some aspects that you guys have talked about. And like I've watched so many times of the videos of old, you guys played with some of the gaining like some of the mechanics that Tesla had in similarities to this DBZ game. But it is not by any means a card game that I think is high on my list. From a digital client enjoyability perspective, even down to just the involvement and the attachment that I have to the gameplay and wanting to get better at it, it's just not there. So I will give this one a very gentle thumbs down, put it to bed, and not look back. As said by Jelly Roll, there's a reason that the windshield is bigger than the rear view mirror.
Oh my gosh. Your references. I will say this game gets a thumbs down from me, but not because I think it's necessarily a bad game. But because I know that I don't have the interest to put the investment in it that I would need. And I do agree with Ian in the fact that I think that this would be a game that if I played it physically, like if I knew Dragon Ball well and I bought the cards physically, I think I would be. I feel like there's people out there who are just over the moon about this game.
Probably.
That absolutely freaking love it. And I think are justified in that feeling.
Yes.
And I because I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's cool. I think it's unique. It's not for me. Now, very different than the thumbs down that I gave for Warp Forge a couple of months ago, where I thought, nope, this is just a bad game and a bad money grab. Whereas this game, I'm looking at it and saying, no, I could totally see why you would spend a lot of money on this game physically and that you would get into it and that you would play it regularly. I can 100% see why you would do that. I'm not going to do that personally, but if this game you feel like is for you in terms of what you've heard us describe, I would encourage you, check out the digital client, play a handful of games and see how you feel about it, and then see what it would be like to get your hands on some physical cards and maybe find a local game shop to play in. Because I think that's probably where this game will be at its sweet spot. Ian, how about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down?
Yeah, I mean, it's a thumbs down. I really don't have much more to add other than I just want to, I just want to, I don't know, what is it? Double click or thumbs up or +1 or whatever the corporate lingo is for whatever Mark just said. Because it's a thumbs down because it's not for me, not a thumbs down because there isn't something good here. I think that there's some depth here. I would never say this is a bad game. I'm just going to say this is a game that doesn't appeal to me. And I also would say if somebody came up to me and was like, hey, Ian, will you pick up a starter deck so we can play, one-on-one and play some physical versions, my starter deck versus your starter deck? I'd say sure. Sounds like fun. I think this might
if somebody
be...
had like 2 decks and they were like, hey, sure, would you play this game with me? I have, like, if I had a buddy who lived close by who owned the Dragon Ball decks, he had a bunch of cards and I would go play with him, I think I would hands down do that. Yeah, I would play the game in that context.
Exactly. And so I think in that context, that's like the only context in which I would like check this game out again. But it's not in opposition to the game. I think it's more, the big thumbs down is really just for the digital client. I anticipate it probably improving over time, but right now it's just pretty bad. I mean, there's some cool things that they do. Great job with the hand rearranging. It's like if you could add that polish to the main menu, that'd be great.
Just like trying to navigate MySpace.
Yeah, it's like once you get into game, it's fine. Yeah. Everything between here and there.
But I also, I also just want to say I think it's a game that is not well suited to a digital client. I understand the value of it for competitive players. They need a way to practice and test. But as far as like, there are, in the same way that there are games where you're like, oh, I wish this was digital so they could do all these cool things with it. This is a game where I just think it is too fiddly to make a smooth digital adaptation. I'm sure maybe I can be proven wrong, but the amount of times you're forced to stop and interact or stop and pass or stop, you know what I mean? Those things get cumbersome in digital clients if you're not careful. So anyways, thumbs down. But the asterisk is there. And I think all of us are on that same wavelength.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, listen, we told you at the top of the show that Ian was going to be taking a month off to catch up on all sorts of things throughout his life. And Gibby and I are going to be taking the helm and driving us into the next game that we're going to be playing. And next month, we wanted to be able. We really didn't want to explore something brand new, I think, without Ian. And so we are going to do a return this month, which I did with Ian and I did when Gibby took a month off last year.
I'm excited.
We're going to do a couple of weeks in a return.
I'm about to break the frame.
Marvel Snap. So a game that I haven't played in about a year. Yeah, I've been playing it. I've been playing it recently. Frame break. Animated frame. All of that stuff is there. We're excited to revisit and let you know what we've experienced coming back to the game, what's changed, what's remained the same. And I can tell you some of the decks that were there aren't there, but some of the ones that have always been there are 100% still there. I've played a handful of games already, and man, it was easy to get thrown back into this game and get addicted to it quick because of how quick the games are. I forgot how well Ben Brode just punched me in all of like the parts of my brain that were like, you should play again.
The bite-sized gaming content is incredible with that game.
Yeah,
sure.
And I've had some fun rounds in it and have been playing. So not next week, because next week we'll be off. We do 3 weeks now. So next week we're just going to be chilling and Gibby and I are going to be catching up on it. The week after that, we'll be back for the first of 3 episodes on our return to Marvel Snap. So be looking for that. Guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. We really appreciate you listening to the starter set and tuning in with us. Let us know in Discord or in the comments on this video if you have been enjoying Dragon Ball Z and maybe if we missed something that one of us should go back and take a look at again in the future. If you feel like, man, you really didn't do it justice here or there. If you're an avid player, we'd love to know. But that's going to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and be sure to come back for next episode. Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of Starter Set. Just a reminder, we do have a YouTube channel and a Patreon page, and there's links to both of those things in the description of this episode. So check those things out. If you'd like to support us, Patreon's the best way to do that. If you'd like to support us in a free way, subscribing to us and liking some videos and dropping some comments over on YouTube is also a really great way to support us. So hope you'll do one of those things and jump in and support what we're doing here at Starter Set. Thank you guys for tuning into this episode, and we'll see you back here for the next one. Hey. Welcome back to the Booster Pack.
Booster Pack.
Yeah, the Booster Pack. On this Booster Pack episode, we're not talking about anything philosophical like we did last time. So much philosophy last time. Mm-hmm. We're just giving an update on the card gaming adventures that we've had. And because some of us have had some pretty cool ones and some shout outs to community members as well. I want to give Gibby the spotlight here, though, to kick us off in the Booster Pack because, man, he's had himself a good week. Good week in card gaming.
Let the confetti fly and put those spotlights on me, baby. I've had a great week in card gaming. I mentioned earlier in the podcast that one of my goals, and I still will be seeking that goal technically, but one of my goals this year for 2024 was to win a major card game tournament, and damn did I come close. I went and played in my store championship at the store I majorly play at in Memphis, the Greater Memphis Magic Arena, and there were 30 plus players in this tournament, and I came in second. I made it all the way to the finals and almost took it home, but shout out to my good friend Ben. He is a fantastic Lorcana player. This is like his second major tournament in a row that he's won. He's a fantastic player in his own right, and he won again. So it was great to share the finals with someone that I was familiar with and that I get along with really great. We had a great turnout. It was a lot of fun, and I'm competing in another Lorcana tournament this upcoming weekend, hopefully. But yeah, it was just exciting to kind of get the validation of some of the hard work and the time and effort that I put in to the Lorcana game, and to see my deck perform, man. And me perform well as a pilot. So that was really really validating. I do want to give a couple shout outs real quick if I can.
Well, first off, show off the mat that you won to the people who are watching on YouTube, and all of you listeners on the podcast, go over to YouTube. You can see the mat that Gibby brought home, which is super cool that Lorcana does this, by the way. There's not even a lot of, there's more promo cards and stuff now.
Let's go.
So I got this mat. The only difference is that if you get first place, the mat has the word champion in the corner. But this mat is super dope. I love the artwork. And this is what I get for making it into the finals. And then for making top 4, I got a enchanted promo. It's hard to see in this camera because it's in this case, but I get an enchanted promo Stitch Rockstar, which is
that's great.
And it's going for quite a lot right now. It's a pretty expensive card, but it's a beautiful artwork. It's the same artwork as the mat. So was really excited about that.
Okay, now to the shout outs. Go with the shout outs.
I was like, okay, so I can go and do my shout outs now. Great. Yes. So we have had quite a few people doing some great work. So first of all, one of our steadfast and best friends in our Discord, Payne placed second at his locals as well. So he got his own mat. And piloted a Ruby Amethyst list, I believe. So he did fantastic. He deserves a big shout out. I also wanted to
and repped the Legends Cast, the OG Legends Cast hat.
The OG Legends Cast hat.
Oh, that's
awesome. How you know he's an OG.
Yeah.
He's got the merch.
Yeah. I wanted to say good luck to our friends I Spy Frolic and Alicia, who are going to over at the Illuminary Library, who are going to be competing in several events themselves, including in Atlanta and Chicago, I believe. DBN will be going to Atlanta to compete. And I also wanted to say real quick, so there's a good friend of mine at our locals in Memphis. So Impact TCG, you can find him on YouTube. Rod Gaston, he's a fantastic YouTuber. He puts out some great content, and he gave us a shout out as well. He competed in the tournament. Go check his content out. We'll have his YouTube channel posted in the show notes of this episode. So yeah, those are my shout outs for now. Gentlemen, how have your week in gaming been?
Yeah, Ian, why don't you tell us, because you have a shout out to a community member in a game that you enjoy as well, right?
Just a quick shout out. I mean, it's been plugged. Just throwing it to our boy Curry. Curry did go to the Orlando Regional. I know he had a winning record, but I believe he missed out on day 2. But I had a great time helping him prep for the event, and we played, a bunch of games and practice. And Curry came up with took a list that a lot of people were playing and came up with some spicy additions, which he is covering in 2 videos. One sort of looking at the evolution of that deck list, all of the different variants, and sort of a deck discussion on it in general. The other one looking at his list post event, as he's made some adjustments and changes, but some of the spice has remained intact, and he plays some games with it. So definitely be checking out those videos from Curry. Really cool list, and one that I've now copycatted and am playing at my locals and having insane amounts of fun with.
He released a video on it literally today, I think.
Yeah, so he released one a couple days ago, and then the second part to it, which is the gameplay, was released today. I know he's working on another deck video to come out sometime soon as well. So I know that we have a lot of Lorcana fans. We got a lot of old LOR fans and stuff in there. But I'll tell you what, Pokemon is a great card game if you want to change a pace game, which feels very distinctly different from a lot of the Magic, Hearthstone board trading games. It really is a fantastic card game, especially in its current state. So I think it's in a really, albeit there's a slight bit of a top dog deck right now, but besides that top dog deck, there are still half a dozen to a dozen viable archetypes in the meta right now, which feels really cool to be in this era of Pokemon. So anyways, just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Well, how about you? Is there anything else in your card gaming this week that you want? I mean, we basically shouted out Curry there. Was there anything other than that in your card gaming?
I guess I can talk about me. Yeah, a couple things. One, spent the weekend. I actually skipped out on some of the store championships in the area this weekend because I had not visited my parents in way too long. So went down there for my birthday and hung out with them. Spent basically all of Saturday gaming with Dead Broke Dad. So
that's fun.
Fantastic. We played an absurd amount of Star Wars Unlimited. We played a bunch of Pokemon. We played Azul, which my wonderful girlfriend Lindsay got me like a travel size Azul. Basically, it's like it's still in a box, but the box is like a third or a quarter of the size of the normal standard big one. And even got my mom to jump in and try it. She's not much of a gamer, and we all had just a great time sort of, playing that game. It's a really nice sort of low stakes puzzle game. So really enjoyed that. And then came back and ran Lorcana League on Sunday. One other little shout out, although of course I know she's ready to run it back. My girlfriend placed 9th, just barely missed the top cut in her event that she played when I was gone. We're playing in another one, both of us, on Saturday, this coming Saturday, and hoping one of us can at least get a Stitch enchanted, and so that would be cool. Unfortunately, I'm then turning around the next day and running our local store championship. So I'm going to have a very long Lorcana-filled weekend. There's like 5 or 6 set championships in my area. I'm only able to compete in one of them.
You should get a promo for
big fingers crossed. Big fingers crossed that I have a good day. I think the meta is in an interesting spot where there's a lot of great decks, but there's a lot of polarized matchups, which you kind of gotta hit the right matchups right now if you want to get into that top 8. And so I'm nervous because it's going to be a huge 50 player tournament. And there's a lot of sweat balls and neck beards in the store that I'm going to. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
And we will be competing in Atlanta. So that's like the bigger thing that I'm like, we've got a month literally a month to
so you guys ended up getting
for
tickets for that Atlanta event.
We did. We're going down, with some friends. So it's going to be, 4 of us going, splitting an Airbnb. So that's cool. I do know that, I Spy will have to meet up. If you're listening, we'll have to meet up at the event, hang out. And, it's going to be intense, but at least when you go to one of those humongo events, they're basically like a Pokemon regional. I think it's it's either 1,000 or 2,000 players. And there's going to be obviously side events to participate in, and even some promos, even if you don't make, the top cuts, like you still get a sick, basically pseudo enchanted promo card, alt arts of some, maybe not staple cards, but some like playable cards. So that's pretty darn cool.
That is awesome. Well, for me, I've been playing a little bit of Snap, and I've been getting back into a little bit of Destiny with some of the stuff in terms of my gaming, and have been focused in on some Star Wars Legion. But a quick shout out to another former member of our community, member of my church, who is Bougie. And he has been playing Star Wars Unlimited with me, kind of lives in my area, goes to my local game shop. And it was like a game day tournament, right? Where there was a winner, and I think you took home some packs and some promos and stuff. But he went and played. I think the really cool thing was he came in 3rd, but he ended up beating the first place person. But FFG's like tournament bracket organizing app has been like sort of mucky and not really ready for release. And so we didn't really know why he came in 3rd, because he should have come in 1st or 2nd, but neither here nor there. The really cool part about that, it was his own homebrew deck using Cassian, who is kind of known to be one of the worst champions in the game, or the worst leaders in the game. And he did a really great job with it and ended up taking out like a really strong Meta Vader deck with it in his last round, which is really, really, really cool. And it was one of the best of 3s. Now there is a 1K tournament coming up in my shop on May the 4th for Star Wars Day. And unfortunately, we're going to be away, so I'm not going to be able to be at it. But I do think that Bougie's going to be playing in it. So I'll bring back some news from him. The other thing is they've been spoiling stuff for the second set, including a couple of leaders. And there's a couple of different mechanics. I'm not going to get into them all. But I thought the cool one was this new mechanic called Smuggle, which allows you to play a card into your resource row. And then later, if it has a smuggle cost, you can actually play it out of your resource row. And so you can lay it down as a resource and later smuggle it out of your resource row onto the board. You even get to take the top card from your deck and replace it. I thought that was really cool. I don't know, has Lorcana added anything like that? The ability to play cards that you inked in the past?
No,
play
not
them on
yet.
The board later?
No.
Anyway,
question: are you allowed to look at your resources at any time for Star Wars? So that's something you can't do in Lorcana. And by design, you're not able to look at them because it's supposed to be sort of a little bit of a memory mini game. I don't know how I feel about that, but I will say I think that's cool for Star Wars Unlimited, especially because there was a similar thing in Versus system where your resources were like, if you placed an event in your resources, you could flip it face up later in the game and use it as a once-of effect. Similarly, there was a keyword called reservist where if you placed a character in your resources where normally you wouldn't be able to get that value, it incentivized you to run enough events or locations, which were a similar thing where you could only flip them from your resources. You were encouraged to run a certain amount of those. But the reservist thing was if you were forced to play a character and it was a reservist, you had that benefit of like, oh, I can bring it in from my resource row and then replace it with the top card of my deck. Smuggle, I think, is for a game that does not have the resource row being as that important. I think it is a beautifully designed mechanic as you pay a little bit of a tax on it almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you pay a little bit more for it, but you can use it that way. I think it's super cool. And I mean, come on, it's super thematic, like with all of the smugglers and the whatever, the guys in the Outer Rim in Star Wars. This next set is focused around the Outer Rim, which has me super stoked. And I'm playing webcam games this Thursday, Twin Sun games. So we got a group of people who are hanging out to play some Twin Sun games over webcam this week, and I'm super pumped about that because I haven't been able to make it out to my shop or play in the last couple of weeks. We've just been too busy to be able to get out there. And so I'm super stoked about that. But yeah, so that's been our last couple of weeks in card games, guys. Gibby bringing home that dub, or that close enough to a dub for a game mat and a promo card. And hopefully Ian, you and your girlfriend this weekend can bring home one too. And get the game mat and
fingers crossed
special one. Yeah, special stitch. Yeah, I know I want to go to the 1K event because there's an alt art uniquely hollowed and marked Mace Windu that you can get if you finish in top 8, and it actually says there's one that just says champion on it that goes like a marked card that says champion on it that goes to any store that runs a 1K event. So I wish that I could plan it. Just not this time. It's going to be a store showdown. Maybe in set 2 I'll be able to do it. That's going to wrap this episode and this post-show banter, the booster pack. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening. Hope you guys have been having a great time in card games. And as always, feel free to let us know in the Discord what it is that you've been playing and what games you've been into. We're going into Marvel Snap next in 2 weeks. Can't wait for that. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.